I used to work as a night security guard for a storage facility just outside of town. It wasn't a bad job. Quiet, easy, mostly just sitting in a booth and doing rounds every couple of hours. The kind of job where nothing really happens. At least, that's what I thought. It was a Tuesday night in late September, and the shift had started like any other. The facility was huge, about 300 storage units spread across a fenced-in lot. A long, single road looped around the whole thing, with one entrance gate and one exit. My job was simple. Sit in the booth, watch the cameras, and do a patrol every 2 hours. By 1 a.m., I had already done 2 rounds. I hadn't seen a single person all night. The storm had started around midnight, and by the time I went for my 3rd patrol, the rain was coming down hard. My flashlight barely cut through the downpour as I walked between the rows of storage units, my boots splashing through puddles. That's when I noticed Unit 144. The lock was missing. I stopped, rain dripping from my hood, and stared at the unit door. Every storage unit had a metal latch for customers to place their own padlock on. This one was empty. I radioed the front desk, but there was no answer. That wasn't unusual. Paul, the guy who worked the desk on my shift, usually slept through the night unless the phone rang. Still, something about this felt off. I stepped closer and reached for the handle. The door slid open easily. The unit was empty, or at least it was supposed to be. In the dim glow of my flashlight, I saw something stacked against the back wall. Old furniture, a few wooden chairs, and a mirror. A tall, antique mirror, standing upright, covered in a thin layer of dust. I hesitated. The storage units weren't supposed to have anything inside unless they were rented out. But according to the system, Unit 144 had been vacant for over 6 months. So why was there furniture inside? I stepped into the unit, my boots echoing against the concrete floor. The air felt stagnant, like it hadn't been disturbed in a long time. I lifted my radio again. "Paul, you there?" Static. I sighed, lowering it. I'd write up a report and check the system later. Maybe it was an old unit that hadn't been cleared out. Maybe. My flashlight flickered. I tapped it against my palm, frowning. Then, in the brief second the light dimmed, I saw something move in the mirror. I froze. It had been quick. Too quick. A shape, shifting in the reflection, like something had just stepped out of view. I whipped around, scanning the dark unit. Nothing. My pulse hammered. I turned back to the mirror, lifting my flashlight to it. My reflection stared back, but the furniture wasn't reflected. The chairs, the dust, even the walls themselves, gone. The mirror reflected a different room, a room that wasn't here. A chill crept up my spine. I stepped back, suddenly wanting to be as far from the mirror as possible. Then, the rain outside stopped. Not gradually, not naturally, instantly. 1 second, I could hear it hammering against the metal roof, then silence. The kind of silence that felt wrong. I turned toward the open unit door. The lot outside was pitch black, except for the single floodlight near the entrance. I took a slow step forward. Then my radio crackled. A voice came through, distorted, warped by static. "Don't turn around." I spun around immediately. The mirror was different now. The reflection no longer showed the storage unit. It showed a hallway, long, narrow, lined with doors. At the far end of the hallway, the lights flickered, and something moved. A shadow, tall, thin, shifting unnaturally, stepped forward, just barely visible in the dim light. Then, the doors in the hallway began to open, one by one. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in short gasps. I had to get out. I had to get away from the mirror. I reached for my radio, but before I could press the button, the unit door slammed shut. The flashlight flickered out completely. I was in total darkness. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking. The air felt thick, like something was standing in the unit with me. Then, a single breath, not mine, right behind me. I lunged forward, slamming my fists against the door. "Paul, open the door." Silence. The air behind me grew colder. Then, slowly, I felt something move past me, not touching me, not making a sound, just moving. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my forehead to the cold metal of the door. I refused to turn around. Then, a whisper, right next to my ear. "You opened it." The unit door slid open on its own. I fell forward, scrambling into the lot, gasping for air. The storm had returned, the rain hammering the pavement, the wind howling through the fence. I turned back toward Unit 144. The door was open. The unit was empty. No mirror, no furniture, nothing. I staggered to my feet, my legs still shaking. My radio crackled. Paul's voice came through, groggy. "Hey, sorry man, I fell asleep. You need something?" I stared at the empty unit, my entire body cold. I opened my mouth, closed it. Then I pressed the button on my radio and whispered, "Who else is here?" Silence. Then Paul's voice, confused. "What? No one. It's just us tonight." I looked back at the unit one last time, and in the reflection of a puddle on the pavement, I saw the hallway again, and something stepping closer. I backed away from the puddle, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. I had seen it. I knew I had seen it. The hallway was still there, reflected in the rain-soaked pavement, the long, narrow corridor lined with doors, stretching into the distance. And someone, was walking toward me, their shadow flickering with every pulse of the distant light. But when I looked up at Unit 144, the storage unit itself, nothing, just an empty, silent space. I wiped the rain from my eyes, my heartbeat hammering in my skull. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Then the radio crackled again. "You opened it." I froze. The voice wasn't Paul's. It wasn't human. It was thin, stretched, like a recording being played on an old, broken speaker. It had the faintest echo, like it wasn't coming from the radio at all, like it was coming from inside my own head. I turned and ran. I don't remember getting back to the security booth. One second I was standing in front of Unit 144, staring at that impossible reflection, and the next I was slamming the door shut, locking it behind me. Paul looked up from his chair, bleary-eyed. "Dude," he muttered, rubbing his face. "What's wrong with you?" I couldn't speak. My lungs burned, my hands still shaking. I turned toward the monitors, scanning the live camera feeds of the lot. Every storage unit was visible on the screens, rows and rows of metal doors, motionless under the floodlights. Unit 144 was empty. It was like nothing had ever been there. I felt sick. Paul frowned. "You good?" I licked my lips, trying to find the words. There was something in one of the units. He snorted. "Bro, it's a storage lot. It's either rats or some homeless guy trying to crash for the night. Which one is it?" I didn't answer, because I didn't know. Paul sighed, sitting up and stretching. "All right, let's check it out." I didn't want to go back. Every part of me screamed to just sit down, pretend I had imagined it, and make it through the rest of the shift. But I knew Paul wouldn't let it go. He grabbed his flashlight and motioned for me to follow. We stepped out into the rain. The storm had weakened, but the wind still howled through the lot, rattling the fences. Paul walked ahead, his boots splashing through puddles. I trailed behind, my hands balled into fists. We reached Unit 144. Paul aimed his flashlight inside. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the empty concrete floor, the cold metal walls. Nothing, just like before. He sighed. "Dude, there's nothing here." I knew that, but I also knew something was wrong. Paul turned to leave. "Next time, don't freak out over nothing." I hesitated. Then, against every instinct screaming at me not to, I looked down. The puddle. It was still there, glistening under the flickering floodlight. And so was the hallway. It hadn't disappeared. It was still waiting. And this time, the door closest to the reflection was open. I sucked in a sharp breath. "Paul," I whispered. He turned, eyebrows raised. I pointed at the puddle, my whole body cold with dread. "Tell me you see that." Paul frowned, stepping closer. He glanced at the puddle, then at me, clearly annoyed. "See what?" I almost laughed. Hysterical. Broken. Because I knew, without a doubt, Paul couldn't see it. This was just for me. I stumbled backward, my stomach twisting. I wanted to tell him to leave, to just get the hell out of here. But before I could say a word, the floodlights cut out. Pitch black. The rain stopped again, just like before. 1 second pounding against the pavement, the next complete silence. The kind of silence that feels alive. Then I heard it. A footstep. Not behind me. Not beside me. Below me. From the puddle. A heavy, deliberate step, like someone was crossing the threshold of an open door. I didn't look down. I couldn't. Paul was muttering something under his breath, probably cursing about the power outage. Then he stopped. I felt it before I saw it. The air around us shifted, like the entire lot had just inhaled, holding its breath. Then, the whisper came again, but this time, it was right next to my ear. "You shouldn't have looked." I ran. I don't remember screaming, but Paul told me later that I was yelling the entire time. I ran straight for the booth, slammed the door, locked it, and collapsed against the desk, gasping for air. Paul followed, cursing. "Dude, what the hell is going on with you?" I couldn't answer. The cameras flickered back on. I turned toward the monitors, my breath still shaky. The lot was empty. Except, no. Unit 144 was closed now. But the lock was back. I leaned closer, my stomach twisting. The lock was rusted, covered in dust, like it had been sitting there for years, as if it had never been removed. Paul was still talking, still asking me what the hell had happened. I barely heard him, because as I stared at the grainy camera feed, I saw something else. A figure. Not in the lot, not in any of the units, but in the reflection of the booth window behind me, watching. I didn't turn around. I just sat there, gripping the desk, staring at the screen, too afraid to move. Paul never saw it. And when morning came, when my shift finally ended and the sun rose over the lot, I forced myself to check Unit 144 one last time. It was empty. No furniture. No mirror. No hallway. But when I turned to leave, I glanced at the puddle one last time. The water was still, smooth, undisturbed, but it didn't reflect me. It reflected the hallway, and one of the doors was still open. I don't work there anymore, but sometimes, when I walk past mirrors, I swear I see a door cracked open behind me, waiting, and I know that one day, I won't be able to look away. I used to drive a lot at night. There's something about the empty highways, the way the road stretches out into the dark, the low hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of headlights from some distant, unseen car. It makes the world feel smaller, quieter, safer. At least, that's what I used to think. Now, when I drive alone at night, I check my mirrors too often. I listen too hard to the silence, because I know what's out there, and I know that if I ever see it again, it won't let me go. It happened last summer. I had just finished visiting my brother in a small town about 3 hours from where I lived. It wasn't a bad drive, just long, mostly straight highway cutting through miles of empty farmland. The kind of road where you could go 20 minutes without seeing another car. By the time I left, the sun was already setting, dipping below the endless rows of cornfields. The sky bled red and orange, fading into deep shades of purple as I pulled onto the highway. My gas tank was full, my playlist was set, and the road was mine. For the first hour, nothing happened. Just me, the music, and the dark. Then I saw the headlights. At first, it was just a faint glow in my rearview mirror. A pair of lights cresting the hill behind me, far in the distance. I didn't think anything of it. Someone else on the road. No big deal. But then, about 10 minutes later, I noticed something weird. The headlights weren't getting any closer. They were still there, in the exact same spot, like they were following me, but not catching up. I slowed down slightly, thinking maybe the car behind me was just maintaining the same speed. But when I looked again, the lights had stopped, like the car had just pulled over. I stared into the mirror, watching as the distant glow of the headlights sat motionless on the side of the road. And then, just as I started to get that uneasy feeling in my gut, the headlights vanished. Not turned off, not faded into the distance, just gone, like there had never been a car there at all. A chill crept up my spine. I checked my phone, resisting the urge to call someone, anyone, just to feel a little less alone. But my signal was gone. I shook my head, forcing a laugh. I was being paranoid. It was just a car pulling off the road, Nothing more. Maybe they had turned around, taken a different route. I cranked up the volume on my music and focused on the road ahead. And that's when I saw the hitchhiker. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. There, just ahead, a figure stood at the side of the road. No car, no houses, just miles of empty farmland. My stomach twisted. Something about him was off. He was standing too still, his posture too stiff. He wasn't holding out his thumb. He wasn't even facing the road, just standing there, staring into the cornfields. As I got closer, my headlights swept over him, and I finally saw his face. Or at least, I should have. But I didn't, because the second my headlights touched him, he turned. Not like a normal person, not gradually. He snapped to face me, his body completely still while his head twisted too far, too fast. And then, he smiled. A slow, creeping grin that stretched too wide, like his face was splitting open. I barely had time to react. My hands jerked the wheel, swerving away as my tires screeched against the asphalt. For a split second, I lost control. My car fishtailed, the edges of the road blurring past me before I finally regained traction. My heart slammed against my ribs. My knuckles turned white against the steering wheel. I gasped for air, my body trembling. And then, against every survival instinct in my body, I checked my rearview mirror. The road was empty. The hitchhiker was gone. I pressed down on the gas, my mind screaming at me to get the hell away. I didn't care about speed limits anymore. I just needed to be somewhere else. The next few miles passed in a blur. My hands shook so badly I could barely grip the wheel. Then, finally, a gas station. The bright neon lights felt like salvation. I pulled in too fast, skidding slightly as I threw the car into park. My breathing was shallow, my skin damp with sweat. I sat there for a long moment, gripping the wheel, trying to convince myself that what I had seen wasn't real. Then, just as I reached for the door handle, my headlights flickered. I froze. The engine was still running, but for a split second, the lights dimmed, like something had passed in front of them. Slowly, I turned toward the passenger seat window. There was a handprint, pressed into the glass. Inside the car, I didn't move, didn't blink. My brain couldn't process it. The print was huge, too long, the fingers tapering to slight points. And then, a tap, soft, deliberate, from the back seat. I didn't think. I lunged for the door handle, throwing myself out of the car and stumbling into the gas station parking lot. The clerk inside turned, startled. "Hey man, you good?" I couldn't answer. I just stood there, staring at my car, the open doors swinging slightly in the wind. The handprint was gone. The back seat was empty. I didn't go back to my car for almost an hour. I just sat in the gas station, staring at the rain-streaked windows, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. I eventually drove home, forcing myself not to check the mirrors. For days, I convinced myself I had imagined it all. Then, a week later, I got an email. No subject, no sender name, just an attachment, a photo of my car, taken from the back seat. I stared at the email for what felt like hours. No subject, no sender, just a photo of my car, taken from the back seat. My stomach twisted. My brain refused to process it, refused to let me believe what I was seeing. My mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was an old picture I had taken by accident. Maybe someone had hacked my email and was messing with me. But I knew better. Because in the photo, my car was exactly how I had left it that night at the gas station. The door slightly open, the rain-streaked windshield, the neon glow of the gas station lights reflecting on the hood, and in the rearview mirror, a shadow, not mine. I slammed my laptop shut so hard I nearly cracked the screen. My chest was tight, my breath coming in short gasps. I jumped up, pacing the room, running my hands through my hair. I needed to do something. I needed to tell someone. But who the hell would believe me? I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking as I dialed my brother. The call rang once, twice, then disconnected. I frowned, checked my signal. Full bars. I tried again. Same thing. No ring, no voicemail, just nothing. Then, before I could process what was happening, my phone buzzed. A new message. No caller ID. My pulse hammered as I tapped to open it. There was no text, just another photo. This time, it wasn't my car. It was my apartment. A picture taken from the hallway outside my door. I stopped breathing. My apartment was silent. I turned slowly, my body locking up with dread. My front door was closed. The peephole was covered, just like always. I took a single, cautious step forward. My pulse pounded in my ears. I reached out, and then I heard it. A tap. Soft. Deliberate. From the other side of the door. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. My brain screamed at me to move, run, hide. But my body wouldn't listen. Another tap. Then, the doorknob turned. I choked on a breath, stumbling backward toward the kitchen. The knob rattled, the metal clinking like someone was testing the lock. I grabbed the nearest object, a knife from the counter. My fingers clenched around the handle, my breath ragged. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the rattling stopped. The apartment was silent again. I stood frozen, the knife still in my grip, waiting. Then my phone buzzed. Another message. I didn't want to look, but I did. You saw me. My stomach lurched. I checked the peephole. Nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table, my back pressed against the wall, the knife still in my hand. I checked my phone every few minutes, waiting for another message, another picture, something. But nothing came. By morning, I convinced myself it was over. I convinced myself that if I ignored it, it would go away. I was wrong. It got worse. For the next week, things changed. It was small at first. My reflection in the mirror lingered too long when I looked away. My radio cut to static whenever I drove past certain roads. I started waking up in different places. I'd go to sleep in my bed and wake up on the couch. Sometimes, the front door would be unlocked. One morning, I found muddy footprints leading from my balcony door to my bed. I lived on the third floor. Then, on Friday night, I saw the headlights again. I was coming back from work, exhausted, barely paying attention to the road. It had been a long week, and I was ready to collapse into bed and forget everything. But then, in my rearview mirror, the same headlights, far back, too far, staying exactly the same distance behind me. A cold, sick feeling spread through my chest. I gripped the wheel, forcing myself to breathe. Then, the lights vanished. Not turned off, not faded into the distance, just gone, like they had never been there at all. I pressed down on the gas, my hands slick with sweat. I didn't check the mirrors. I didn't want to see what might be there. By the time I got home, my heart was racing. I stumbled inside, locked every door, every window. I turned on every light in my apartment. Then my phone buzzed. A video? The sender? No caller ID. I swallowed hard. My hands shook as I pressed play. The screen was dark, barely visible at first. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized what I was looking at. A video of me, driving. The exact same stretch of road I had been on just minutes ago, filmed from inside the back seat. I dropped my phone. My whole body went numb. Then, through the phone speaker, a whisper, slow, distorted. Don't look in the mirror. I stood there, shaking. My mind refused to make sense of it. Then I heard it. Behind me, a rustling sound, like fabric shifting, like someone adjusting their seat. In the back seat of my car, parked just outside my window. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, a soft tap. Not at my door. Not at my window. At my closet. From the inside. I ran. I don't remember grabbing my keys. I don't remember unlocking the door. I just remember sprinting into the hallway, gasping for air. My body trembling so hard I thought my legs would give out. I called my brother from the stairwell. This time, the call went through. He picked up on the first ring. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight. My mind barely able to form words. Then, before I could say anything, his voice came through the line. Don't go back inside. I haven't. I left that night and never returned. I had my landlord pack my things. I changed my number. I moved 2 cities away. But I still see headlights in my rearview mirror sometimes. I still hear taps at my window at night. And sometimes, when I pass by a reflective surface, I see the backseat of my car. and something sitting there, smiling, waiting. I've been a delivery driver for about 5 years now, mostly working the late-night shift. Less traffic, better tips, and the city feels different when it's dark, quieter, emptier. But there's a trade-off. Night shifts mean weird encounters, and every now and then, something happens that you can't shake off. This story isn't something I talk about. Even writing it down makes my skin crawl, but I need to get it out of my head. It happened last November. I had just picked up my last order for the night, a single burger and fries from a 24-hour diner. The drop-off location was deep in the suburbs, a neighborhood I didn't recognize. The houses there were huge, but spaced far apart, their long driveways winding through rows of dead trees. No street lights, no sidewalks, just darkness, except for the glow of porch lights flickering in the wind. The GPS led me down a narrow road that looked more like a private driveway than a real street. My headlights barely cut through the thick fog rolling in from the trees. The house number popped up on the screen, 1603 East Hollow Road, and I slowed down, squinting through the windshield. There was no house, just an empty lot. I double-checked the address. The map showed a house, but there was nothing here, just an overgrown patch of land surrounded by trees. The only sign that anything had ever been there was a crumbling stone foundation, half buried in the dirt. I frowned and checked the delivery instructions. No special requests, just the address. Maybe the house was further up? I crept forward, scanning the darkness for anything that looked remotely like a driveway. That's when I noticed it. A dim light, flickering deep in the trees. It was small, barely visible through the fog, like someone was carrying a lantern through the woods. It moved slowly, weaving between the trees, too steady to be the wind. I should have left. I should have turned around and driven away. But instead, I pulled out my phone and called the customer. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I glanced back at the trees. The light was closer now. A part of me wanted to roll down the window and call out, but something deep in my gut told me not to. Then, before I could make a decision, my phone buzzed. A text message. Leave it on the ground. No name, no greeting, just that one sentence. A shiver ran down my spine. Something about it felt wrong, like whoever sent it had been watching me. I forced a laugh, shaking my head. It was probably just some paranoid recluse who didn't want to interact with people. That was fine. I didn't want to interact with them either. I put the bag on the curb and took a picture for proof, just like I always did. But when I looked at the screen, my stomach dropped. The photo showed the food sitting on the ground, and behind it, standing at the edge of the trees, was a figure. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. Nothing. The woods were empty, silent. The light was gone. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering. The wind rustled through the dead leaves, but there was no movement, no sound of footsteps. The air felt wrong, like something was standing just out of sight. My phone buzzed again. Thank you. I didn't stay to read it twice. I ran back to my car, locking the doors the second I was inside. My hands were shaking as I put it in reverse, my tires kicking up dirt as I backed out of that dead-end street. The whole drive home, I couldn't stop checking my mirrors. The unease clung to me, a feeling I couldn't explain. That night, I told myself I was being paranoid, that I had misinterpreted what I saw. Then, the next morning, I woke up to a new text message. A picture, a photo of me from the night before. Standing by my car, looking at my phone. There was only one word attached to the message. Next. I stared at the message, my entire body frozen. My brain couldn't process it. The timestamp said 3:12 a.m., an hour after I had gotten home. My bedroom door had been locked, my windows shut, but someone had been outside, watching me. I forced myself to breathe. My first thought was that maybe it was a prank, some tech-savvy creep messing with me. Maybe a hacker. But that didn't explain the photo. That didn't explain how they knew where I lived. I checked the sender's number. No caller ID. My hands shook as I blocked the number and deleted the message. But even after I erased it, the image burned in my mind. Me, standing by my car, unaware that someone was right there in the darkness. I barely slept. Every creak in my apartment made my skin crawl. I kept my phone in my hand, checking the lock screen every few minutes, expecting another message. But nothing came. By morning, I convinced myself it was over. I was wrong. It started with small things. The next night, my motion sensor light flicked on by itself. I looked outside, heart pounding, but the porch was empty. I stared at the black screen of my phone, waiting for another message. But again, nothing. The following night, I heard knocking. Not loud, not frantic, just 3 slow, rhythmic knocks at my front door at exactly 3:12 a.m. I didn't answer. I didn't even move. I just sat in my bed, holding my breath, listening. Minutes passed, then an hour. The knocking didn't come again. By the third night, I was on edge. I kept telling myself it was paranoia, but deep down, I knew someone was watching me. I spent hours trying to track down the original order. The delivery app wouldn't show the name, only the drop-off location, 1603 East Hollow Road. But when I searched for the house online, there was nothing. No property records, no old sales, no evidence it had ever existed. I even checked Google Street View, but the image was blurry and distorted, like the satellite had glitched when it tried to capture the location. Then I dug deeper, and that's when I found something. An old news article from 1997. A house on East Hollow Road had burned down. The cause? Unknown. No survivors. The owner? Unidentified. The image in the article showed the same overgrown lot I had driven to. I shut my laptop, my skin crawling. That was impossible. I had delivered food to that address. Someone had been there. Someone had texted me. I tried to brush it off, go about my night as usual. But the moment I got into my car for my next shift, my radio cut to static. Loud, violent, like it was trying to drown out everything else. I turned it off. It stayed on. The static shifted, distorting into something almost like a voice. A whisper. At first, I couldn't make out the words. But then, through the static, next. I slammed the power button, my hands shaking. The static didn't stop. Then my phone buzzed. A new message. Look outside. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't want to, but I did. The street was empty. No headlights. No movement. Just darkness. Then, lightning flashed, and I saw it. A figure standing at the far end of the street. Too far to make out a face, but tall, still, watching. My heart nearly stopped. Another flash of lightning, and it was closer. I threw my car into reverse and sped out of the parking lot. I didn't take any more orders that night. I didn't go home. I drove to a 24-hour gas station, parked under the brightest lights I could find, and sat there with my doors locked until sunrise. By morning, I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was seeing things, that it was just some messed up prank. Then I got the final message. One single word. Soon. That was 2 weeks ago. I haven't worked night shifts since. I haven't driven down East Hollow Road, but I still check my phone at 3:12 a.m. every night, waiting, because I know one of these nights, the knocking is going to come again, and this time, it won't stop.